Okay, everyone. So it's here at the top of the hour. Like I said just a moment ago, or if you're just joining us, we're going to wait maybe one more minute here. Let's let some people filter in. We won't give them too much time. Top of the hour is what we said, so we'll get started in just a moment. I'll do a brief introduction here of Tracy, and then she'll take the stage. I'll mute myself, get out of the way, bring questions through the chat panel or through the Q&A section, and we'll have a really productive hour together. Okay. So we'll just hang tight for just another moment, and then we'll get started. Okay, so we're here. Everyone's joined us, at least for the most part. If you're in the right place, you should want to learn about online will writing programs. Tracy Malloy Curtis is going to be walking us through everything here today. Tracy works with Matt Warwick Donor Digital, director of their planned giving or legacy giving initiatives, and also has extensive legal experience and background, thus the extra initials after her name.
It's a little pretentious.
Just a little bit, but we all appreciate it, especially during a webinar like this. So Tracy's going to take the stage here, and she's going to walk us through, what purpose and what place online will writing programs have within your planned gift marketing program. Before she dives right in, just hear from the MarketSmart perspective. We see that there are all sorts of opportunities to bolster and support your planned giving program, and this new wave of will writing tools may or may not be one that fits your organization. Whatever it is, where we really come from is engagement fundraising, the idea of cultivating relationships with your supporters. And if there are ways that these tools can be used to support that, great. If they're not the right fit, it's not the right fit. It's all about engagement, all about supporting. So we're very open here and agnostic. And with that as the foreground, I'll hand the mic over to Tracy. And again, put questions in the chat, questions in the Q&A. We'll make sure that we're addressing them as we move forward.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you have any issues hearing me, just shoot a message to us. My usual disclaimer is that I work at home and with a bunch of dogs and a kid and all of that, so sometimes it can get a little loud, but that's, working mom life. And, hopefully we'll all be able to hear each other and have a good conversation. So just my background, obviously, up on the screen there. I have been working in planned giving for most of my career with a little side trip over to being a securities litigator with a law firm in New York, from which I went screaming back to planned giving. Generally, I've focused on social justice and advocacy organizations in my fundraising, both in planned giving and major gifts. I've worked on the organization side for most of my career, running my own planned giving programs and working directly with donors. And then almost 2 years ago, I joined Mal Warwick, which is a full service integrated marketing agency to build out our legacy giving marketing capacity. So that's me. I kind of live and breathe planned giving. I'm obsessed with it. I think about it way too much when I'm not knitting or lifting weights or whatever. But one of the challenges we're going to have here is keeping this to an hour, because I could talk about this stuff for days, and hopefully I will keep on track. Many of my clients know that I like to think out loud before I get to a conclusion, but I tried to do that thinking out loud before we all got here. So hopefully that'll help. So I'm going to just start with some disclaimers because I am a lawyer and we have to have those. When we're talking about online will writing programs, we know there are a number of vendors working in this area. Nothing I am saying here relates to any particular vendor, is directed at any particular vendor, or will apply to every vendor that is out there. I will not be discussing any of them by name or anyone's particular programs. Certainly everyone should feel free to do their research and reach out to these companies directly to have questions answered and learn about their products, but that's not my role. Mine is, as a consultant, whose primary job is to put together the pieces of my clients' plan giving marketing programs to make them effective and raise a lot of money for them. Bringing in partners as needed, initiatives as needed. I'm sort of the cruise director for their marketing programs. And again, I'm also a former director of plan giving who has been in the position of pulling together partners and initiatives for my programs. Currently, I'm not partnering with, none of my charities that I consult with are partnering with any vendor on any of these. All of my clients and many other charities have approached me for my opinions on these things. And basically what I'm trying to do here is let you all eavesdrop on the conversations that I'm having with my clients. So, you know, if you're here looking for 3 easy ways to implement will writing, you know, programs into your marketing program, this isn't really for you, mostly because I'm not about 3 easy ways. I'm about putting a lot of thought into what we're doing and why we're doing it and figuring out how to be as effective as possible. So that being said, let's start. What's the appeal of these? Well, it's convenience. I mean, really, it just comes down to that. We live in a world where everything is available to us at our fingertips through our keyboards. I'm sure my mail carrier could attest to that, given all the Amazon packages he's got it field for me. Look, for individuals, you know, these programs, they're easy, they're private, they're cheaper than going to a lawyer. And it's just super convenient. You can do them in the middle of the night. You can do them when you want to. You can come back to them. You don't have to actually talk to a person, which increasingly is an issue these days. And any of us who work directly with donors know that it can be very challenging to get people to actually talk to you these days. So, you know, the other thing is that we live in a world of information abundance now. You can find a lot of information, whether it's correct or incorrect, very easily. And people and donors are able to pull that information together for themselves now. We're not the gatekeepers of information about charitable estate planning anymore. People can find that stuff on their own, and they do, and they like to. For organizations, the ones that I've talked to and the ones that I've discussed this with, I mean, it's the same thing. It's convenience, right? The majority of Americans don't have a will. We're always trying to figure out how to get our organizations in front of people and ask them for a gift. I think for many organizations, they can see this as a simple solution for expanding their legacy giving program and their legacy society, especially for smaller organizations that don't have a comprehensive legacy marketing plan. And I should put simple in quotes because I don't know that it necessarily is. And it's a way to get donors to disclose their gift intentions, because many organizations have a really hard time getting people to tell us that they've actually put us in their plans. You know, the spread of donors disclosing gifts versus not disclosing, and you find out after their lifetime, it's estimated all over the place, but as high as, you know, 1 in 8 are disclosed ahead of time. So, you know, there's a lot of appeals to these, which is why they're causing a lot of interest and a lot of conversation in our world right now. But one thing I really believe is that there is no quick fix in legacy marketing, right? And there's no quick fix in fundraising. There just isn't. And if you're looking for one, it's going to be hard to find one that's going to have lasting impact. Supporting our donors through sometimes decades of their planning and life journeys, it's time, it's resources, it's, you know, having a long view, sometimes decades long. It's having good strategy and good staffing. You know, you get into it, you get out of it what you put into it. And so this is something I believe, and something I hope that we'll all keep in mind as we start thinking about, you know, what we're doing with our programs and with these. Okay, I'm a lawyer, so I'm sorry. There's always more disclaimers and cautions here. So a lot of the conversation that I see out in our world on message boards and so on, usually it's coming from 2 directions, right? There are people who believe very strongly that no one should be using these platforms. No organization should be paying to offer these platforms to people for a number of reasons. The other main area of conversation are people marketing these platforms and all the benefits and how they can be really great for your marketing program. Those are two totally different discussions, right? You can't counter each other's, you know, opinion in that way by going head to head on this. The reality is, if you decide that ethically programs, it doesn't matter how effective. Likewise, you may decide that, you know, you're okay legally, ethically with using these programs, but they're not going to fit into your marketing program the way, you know, you might think they do. So there's a couple of different conversations here. So, but I am going to start out with some of the potential risks here. There are folks in our community, well-respected people who've been doing this a long time, who do believe that we shouldn't be using these products, or at a minimum, we should not be paying for these products for our donors to write their wills. And, you know, there are some significant issues and liability issues that really come down to the idea of a charitable beneficiary paying for a donor's will is problematic. There is nothing that I'm aware of that's particularly completely on point around this. There's a Maryland ethics opinion where a board member who was an attorney asked, said that he would write wills for free if people put his organization in their plans, and that didn't fly. The difference here to some extent is that none of these platforms that I'm aware of require that you put the organization in the will. You're paying for a lot of wills that may not have you in it. But it's a concern, and there's not, from what I can see, any updated ethics or other opinions on this. From my perspective, working at a fundraising agency, there's some data privacy issues that you need to be aware of. What are they doing with your donors' information, and how are they using it? You know, obviously this can come up against issues of undue influence, again, when, you know, you're paying for a donor to put you in their will. Oops, sorry about that. And, you know, one issue that was brought up to me is that this can step on other estate planning professionals' toes in your community. I'm not as worried about that as a lawyer. You know, my feeling is that I need to show the value that I add to my clients. But those are some issues that have been brought up. Again, there could be a whole webinar just on this. But I think my takeaways here is, don't even think about using these programs unless you have thoroughly vetted them. So you need to get your in-house counsel involved and your finance team. And if they don't have the experience, you need to get outside counsel to look at this and to take all of this stuff into consideration. I'm often surprised at how people will jump into things that could lead to liability for their organizations without actually getting the right advice. If you can't afford good advice, you can't afford to use these programs. And, you know, that might sound a little absolute, but I really believe in it. If you cannot afford to handle a will contest, you probably shouldn't be using these as well. As far as I know, there have been no will contests arising from a messed up estate plan that was done through one of these products, but there will be at some point. And then we'll learn something from that, I think. But until there is an ethics opinion, a legal case, or a will contest, you know, some of this is up in the air, and you need to get good counsel to decide whether, in your opinion, independent opinion, you are okay with the risks. Okay, so, all right, lawyer hat off, but you should know. Okay, let's move on to this though. Going back to why people do these, it's convenient, right? So tomorrow, the land that I have never, in fact, actually found yet, the mystical land where all of our productivity, motivation, and achievement is stored. Yes, people procrastinate. They do not make their plans. One of the biggest and most vexing concerns in our world is that people don't plan. You can't get them to put you in their will if you can't get them to actually make their plans. It's vexing for us, it's vexing in the financial planning world and all of that. And of course, you know, some of the stuff we've learned, especially from our friend Russell James and other folks working in this area, is that it's not enough to just tell people they should put you in their plans. It's not enough to tell people all the reasons they need to plan. It's really not useful to, you know, tell them all the bad things that'll happen if they don't plan. That doesn't actually work. Now, I am not going to go down the rabbit hole of behavioral science, because there are people who are experts in this who will start sending me messages to stay out of their lane and stick to what I know about. But this stuff is important because we have to understand why people act the way they do and what might motivate them to act when we evaluate which tools we're going to use to get them moving. And so, you know, what is it? Procrastination's the big one. It's fear, right? Avoiding pain. We don't want to talk about death. We don't want to deal with challenging family dynamics. We don't want to talk about the end of our lives. We don't want to make these decisions. It makes it easy to avoid them. We have omission bias, right? Tendency to prefer inaction to action. Inertia, myopia, focus on the near term, and, you know, present bias, you know, our ability to underestimate the importance of future consequences. And of course, choice overload always, welcome to my life, is decision fatigue. But these are all things that play into people's failure to plan that we're actually trying to address through these and other tools. And an effective plan giving marketing program is built around this. It's not built around soliciting gifts. I do very little gift solicitation in the marketing programs that I run, because again, that's pretty far down the path. If you're at the point where you're asking someone for a gift, they've gotten past this, or they should have gotten past this, or you should have helped them get past this, so that they can actually, you know, move forward. So onward. So what are we trying to do here? In my opinion, and again, these are my opinions, they may not track with what the vendors of these programs believe about their programs or think about how they should be used. They may not track with your own experience of how you're using these or not. This is just purely my perspective. And again, you're eavesdropping on conversations I'm having with my clients, which is okay. But what we're trying to do, we're trying to get them to act. We're trying to push them into getting over the procrastination and the inertia and all of that. We're trying to take away the barriers that are blocking people from moving forward, right? And this is even more challenging in plan giving because it's not like pushing people to write a check. These are, you know, carefully considered long-term decisions. They're not impulse decisions. And so, you know, it's even harder to move people towards taking action on those kinds of decisions. I think the assumption that I see in most of these products is that, you know, by making this easy, making it convenient, making it feel good, people will do it. And that once they take that step, they have more momentum into continuing their planning, revising their plannings, and so on. So to some extent, I see these programs as sort of first step initiatives. Whether they really are a first step is not something I'm sure about for a couple of reasons that we'll discuss. Because there's some other things going on here, right? It's not just failure to move forward with writing a will. There's a lot of things that get in the way of people beginning their plans, right? That we see. Boomers are in the sandwich generation right now, right? They're taking care of kids who maybe college age, they're taking care of elderly parents and trying to untangle their financial and planning issues, and are struggling with that. There's uncertainty in terms of, you know, the economy and in terms of, you know, people's ability to plan for retirement. There's, you know, there are families who have family members with special needs that they have to kind of deal with, that add, you know, additional barriers and additional considerations in terms of planning. Beyond that, a will is just one part of planning, right? There's actually a lot of pieces that have to get put together into a plan. So is encouraging people to write a will, is that the first step that you should be taking? or not. I'm not sure.
So Tracy, we actually
yes.
have a really good question that came in here that I'd like to run by you. So this comes from one of the folks that's joined us here today.
Yep.
They were vetting this concept because a friend did their free will on one of these websites, and she
Yep.
ended up asking this individual all sorts of questions around that. And then she ended up add things that were partially based on what I and other friends had told her. So essentially this friend solicited a bunch of advice. And this individual who's joined us here today says, I was answering her questions and I felt like I was practicing without a license. And he says, she says, you're a lawyer. Is this a concern that you have? And I wonder, for everyone in the audience who has been in that, you have a family member or a friend ask you all these questions and you're not necessarily equipped to answer them. Is that one of the concerns you do have about these programs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure. I think that's definitely, again, why you need to get good independent legal advice around this. So again, the idea of unauthorized practice, it's not entirely clear in this area. And you need to protect yourself by getting actually good advice around this, given that it's not particularly clear. But yeah, it's definitely, for me, it would be a concern.
So on like a personal level, it's a bit of like, I don't feel comfortable answering this for all of us that don't have those initials. And then as on an organizational level, it goes back to your point about, okay, we need to, vet this throughout our processes.
For sure. And we're going to talk about some of the things that, can play into this. Someone also asked for the site on the Maryland ethics case. I'll post that towards the end. I can't access it right now, but I have it.
Great.
Okay. So, one of the assumptions I think around these programs that we're thinking of is, is a DIY will better than no plan or no will at all? Maybe, maybe not. Now, look, I have dealt with many a donor who has gotten very bad advice from lawyers. I have had to untangle a fair number of charitable plans that were created by lawyers that were not done correctly, including some really basic things that I felt like some of these lawyers should know. That being the case, a DIY will is not necessarily better, because if you mess it up, it may be invalid. It may not do what you want it to do. It still could subject your estate to the intestacy laws. So I don't think that it's easy to say for sure that it's always better. The other issue too is that for the most part, or in many circumstances now, the majority of people's assets don't pass through wills. And so, without that consideration, you're definitely, again, is the will the right first step? And again, speaking to what other folks are talking about, these can miss critical information, right, that an attorney would be able to chat with you about, right? What are you paying for when you're hiring an attorney? You're paying for advice, not for the documents. These days, many trust and estates attorneys are using software to churn out wills and other documents, but you're paying for the counsel. And there's a lot of things that you need counsel on. So guidance on choosing an executor. In my experience in plan giving, that has been a large concern, a big concern, especially for people who may be single, who don't have close family, whose friends have passed away. Maybe it's a huge concern, and especially for people with smaller estates. So working through some of that, guidance on choosing guardians for kids. It's not just that you need to do it, it's who's it going to be? And what do you have to think about when you're doing that? Is it better to have someone manage both the kids and their money? Or is it better to have separate folks doing that? All these are questions that you would talk through with a lawyer. How to take care of your pets. Many of these products, will ask if you want to allocate money or a caregiver for your pets, but there's a lot of other considerations actually. And I say this as someone, I work with a number of animal rights and protection charities, and these donors, it's a big deal for them. Leaving what assets to who and which charities. We all know, I think in our field, that oftentimes the best gift to leave to charity is through a beneficiary designation because of the tax issues involved in naming a non-spouse beneficiary. These are not part of these programs. And then again, just the family issues, the tough conversations that people have to have. If you're leaving family out of your plans, that's something that you need to talk about and the potential ramifications of. A big one for some of my clients is, I have organizations I work with who their primary stakeholders are folks who have family members with special needs. There is no way you want a simple will when you have a family member with special needs for a whole host of reasons, dealing with it not actually covering their needs to messing with their eligibility for government benefits and so on. If people have family members with mental health or capacity issues, and not the same thing, but really high net worth people, they're going to have complicated people with blended families. There are so many things that you need to really talk about. And that's what you're paying for, right? Not just the document. And so in all of those cases, a DIY will is not necessarily going to get you where you need to go and could cause some significant problems. So just a little aside, I've done many, many wills online because even though, yes, I'm a lawyer and I'm perfectly capable of writing my own will, and I know a whole lot of trust and estate attorneys, it's easy and it's convenient and it seems on the surface like I don't really have a complicated situation. So I'm married, my husband's self-employed, all of our assets, which are not many, are titled jointly. I have one child, a couple of pets, a mortgaged house. My primary assets are in retirement plans, and some computers, stuff like that. And so I did a bunch of wills online through a bunch of these programs. And again, not everything I say here applies to all of them. Some of them asked about more of these situations than others. But as a rule, they didn't ask if my kid had special needs. They didn't ask how my assets were titled. There were challenges in how I could make a bequest, whether, some wouldn't allow a specific bequest, some wouldn't allow a contingent or residuary bequest. No discussion of, again, assets. We have a business. Didn't mention that my retirement plan and other transfer on death or payable on death assets might be better for charitable gifts. Didn't even ask about those assets and whether I had them. And again, some did, some didn't. And importantly, in this day and age, it didn't ask whether I had a prior spouse, stepchildren, blended families, all of which, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of assets, to have these situations. So there's a reason that none of them were executed, because none of them were right. So again, it's not a completely, I don't have a super challenging life in terms of estate planning, but there are some considerations there that I felt I was worried that weren't brought up. And then just a cautionary donor story. We all have these. I had a donor who called me one day, lovely man, as they all are. I mean, working in Plan Giving, you work with the best donors ever, I think. And as a consultant, it's one of the things I really miss right now is having these conversations. Lovely guy called me. I love your organization. I'm leaving everything to you. Awesome. That's the call you want, right? But being an experienced Plan Giving officer, I said, well, let's talk a little bit about what that means. What are your assets? How have you set this up? Let me hear a little bit about it. So almost all of his assets were in retirement plans with a small condo. He did a will online. He left, he made the will, he just left everything to the charity. I said, well, but what about your beneficiary designations? Did you update those as well? Well, no, because I put in the will that it was all going to you. Well, no, it's not. So who's your beneficiary? It was his brother who he hated, and who also hated our organization. Like, none of that's going to end well, And so we had to have that conversation about beneficiary designations, not, beneficiary designations overriding wills and so on. He didn't have that conversation with anyone. And if I hadn't asked him about that, his will would not have done what he wanted it to do. I think we all have issues and stories like that. So, and it's important to keep in mind.
Tracy, I have a question for you. From your perspective, when you come in as counsel to your clients, is there any concern that they're almost being misled, it's obviously incumbent upon that individual who's completing this online will, for them to understand the implications and what it means. But have you had any conversations around like, this could potentially be misleading for that individual? They think that they're that exact story that you just gave. Are you having those conversations? And what's
everything that's in this presentation are conversations I'm having with my donors.
So these are really practical, essentially.
This is just practical. This is what I have to think about. And this is true of any initiative, any campaign that I'm proposing to someone. These considerations are not just for these will writing platforms. They're for other types of campaigns and things like that we do as well. But they all should be thought through. And again, we'll talk in a little bit about how do you target audiences for things like this, and this comes into play there. So that being said, given all of this, where are we going to put our marketing dollars for our programs? How are we going to allocate it between initiatives and campaigns? My usual rule of thumb is that you don't put all of your eggs in one basket. You don't depend on one campaign or one initiative to support your program, whether it's a will writing program, whether it's a survey, whatever. You can't depend on one thing, right? So these are, again, to reiterate, these are meant to get people to act and get people into your pipeline early-ish, right? Maybe when they make that first will, getting them to start planning. But this isn't your entire program. I mean, one of the things you have to think about when deciding if I'm going to invest in this tool, which has a specific purpose, is it meets donors' needs, is very convenient, and offers a really straightforward sort of opportunity. I always will ask people, well, what else are we going to put in place to, identify donors whose plans have changed, to confirm these gifts, to recognize that donors will change their plans over and over again in the course of their lifetime, which we're also going to talk about. And do we have additional campaigns and resources and outreach that will match people's needs as their lives change? Do we have ways to provide opportunities to reconfirm gift intentions or to notify us that we've changed? And we'll talk about some of those. So there's a lot of assumptions when you're using a will writing platform as your primary marketing technique, that you're going to get another whack at assisting them, right? I hear a lot of, well, we get into that first plan, right? And then we'll be able to steward them, and we'll be able to be there to help them update their plans if this isn't the right way to do it, or when things change. Yeah, that's a big assumption, which we will talk about. And then there's another assumption that getting people into your marketing pipeline early is actually the best use of your resources. It may not be. It may. It may not be. And again, that these tools are the best way to get people into your pipeline. And if you're building your entire marketing program, which a number of organizations I have spoken to are putting all of their marketing assets into these. This is what they are doing as their marketing program. And, again, for some of them, I think they feel like this is a jump start to their program. It can be, for sure. It's going to help them get immediate checks on their board, and maybe allow them to ask for additional resources. But there's assumptions there, and you need to know what assumptions you're making when you're doing this. As a reminder, gifts are not final until people die and you get the money. A gift intention, someone who says, I have put you in my will, as far as I'm concerned, they're a qualified lead until they die. Right? That disclosure implicates how you steward them. But what we're talking about here really are revocable gifts. And so, the gifts may or may not show up. And I'm just going to pull up some notes I have here. Sorry about that. So, a lot of times when folks are asking me, well, it seems like there's a pretty good ROI on these programs, right? That, we invest in them and we get a whole bunch of people putting us in their will, and that's a lot of money. It's not. It's not money until they die, and you get the money, and they will change their plans over and over again. when we talk about the consideration continuum, what we mean is that donors, again, will continue to consider whether to keep your organization in their plans multiple times over the course of their life. And so you cannot count these gifts until you get them. And, you know, as a reminder, there is a significant attrition rate for bequests. I think Russell James found that, you know, about 45% of gifts don't pan out. You don't get them. Many organizations are not actually tracking this. And we'll talk about this too, is, you know, are you looking at how many gifts you're losing, how many people you're losing from your legacy society without a gift? If you're not, you really should be looking at that, because it's a little bit eye-opening. And the more you know about how many people you're losing from that group, the, you know, the better. So of course I have Zach, a quote from Greg, your boss here, about how, you know, needs and interests are fluid and they change over time. And you have to take that into account when you're putting together your marketing plan.
And Tracy, we have another good question that's come in here from QA, which it says, you know, is there an average or standard number of times that you anticipate an individual will revise that will during their lifetime? And I'm sitting here trying to think back to some of the research that Dr. James has done, but maybe you'll have something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple times, right? Like the interest in estate planning jumps up around age 45, which makes sense. That's when people's kids are, you know, well, in my case, you might be having kids late in life, or they might be, you know, getting into college and growing up. There's times in their 60s, 65, 70, when people are retiring and looking ahead to retirement. And then we know that the majority of charitable estate plans are added within 5 years of death. And that comes from Dr. James's research. So yeah, there's multiple times. And again, it's not the first will that counts. It does to some extent, because he's also found that gifts that are added earlier on can be bigger gifts, but it's the last will that counts, the last plan that counts. And that happens about 5 years before people die. So, you know, in looking at whether the ROI is worth it for implementing these programs, you can't just say we uncovered 100 bequests and that is, you know, given our average bequest, that's $5 million. And we're going to count that against, you know, we paid $100,000 for this program. We got $5 million in gift commitments, and that's a, you know, 5,000% ROI. It's not. It's just not. And especially if you don't have an understanding of the attrition in your program. So here's a couple little graphics on how we're sort of think of that consideration continuum. And repeat is kind of the big one here. People will reconsider over and over during the course of their lifetime. You get that gift in, you need to start all over again. And you need to build into your marketing plan touch points that reach across this continuum, right? That are offering value and offering resources and offering stewardship throughout the donor's life as their plans and their planning needs change. Sure, and you know, someone just brought up, of course, you know, there are a number of things that can trigger, you know, an estate plan change, you know, illness, and so on. And of course, again, if you haven't dug into Russell James's work, do it, because he talks a lot about that. This is actually, I'm sorry, this is a not a great slide, but this is sort of a worksheet that one of my clients is using and trying to figure out attrition from their legacy society, right? And what they can really look at in terms of their pipeline and in terms of their projections. And they're looking like, how many people year over year did they lose from their legacy society, either because they died, and if they died, did you get the gift or did you not? Were they removed because they took you out of the plans, and so on? And they're also measuring this in their qualified lead pool as well. You know, this is really key and something to keep in mind when, you know, you're looking at the ROI of these things. If you're not keeping track of this stuff, start to. And if you don't have ways in your marketing plan to learn this information, you need to build some in. I have one client who we've built in multiple pathways to get people to reconfirm their gifts and to let us know when things have changed and they might be in a position that they're revising their plans or need additional resources. And so, you know, on a yearly basis, they're having, you know, several hundred people reconfirm and give them updates on where they are. And that's really valuable to their program in terms of knowing that they're keeping these gifts. And that's all done through their marketing program. So, I mean, the other thing to think about, you've built in one of these programs, you get loads of people putting in their plans, hopefully, right? I mean, that's the goal if you're doing this. If this is all you're doing in your marketing program, again, this is a problem. You need additional resources. Now, I have clients of all sizes, big organizations, small organizations with varying level of resources, but even the most well-funded plan giving programs I work with don't have enough resources. And if anyone wants to chat offline about how to ask for more resources for your program, I have thoughts. I have thoughts on a lot of things, but I specifically have thoughts on that one. So definitely I'll be giving my contact information out. But think about it. Do you have the resources to steward people for the amount of time that you need to if you're getting them into your pipeline early in their 40s and 50s with that first will? And what is the value? Where are you going to put your money? The reality is that, again, since most charitable gifts are added within 5 years of death, you know, if I had to choose, I might be focusing on that group. Right? If I had to really weigh where I'm going to put my resources in terms of marketing, I mean, look, I want to get people in the pipeline early so I know who they are and I can steward them. But when push comes to shove, the benefit for my program right now is going to be working with those older folks who are getting that last plan in place. As our friend Robert Sharp has said, you know, a fewer higher qualified responses from older people are going to be more important than a whole lot of responses from people in their 40s and 50s, unless you have the kind of well-resourced program that has a plan in place to steward people for a very long time, right? If you don't have the resources to steward people, I mean, this is a problem. I'll give a sort of a cautionary story here. I was hired at an organization a number of years ago to relaunch their plan giving program. And I discovered that all of their Legacy Society members had been marked as deceased in the database so that no one else would talk to them. So many of these people had been in the Legacy Society for 10, 15, 20 years. And to the organization, they were dead. They got nothing. They got nothing. And that's, you know, they didn't want other folks to talk to them for some reason, but they didn't have a plan in place to steward them. And, you know, they lost a lot of those gifts. As I discovered when I had these awkward conversations with people asking if they were still alive. And if we were still in their plans. And in many cases, yes, they were alive, and no, we were not. Because we dropped the ball 10 years before. It is, yes, Kate, it is a stewardship horror story. It gives me nightmares still, thinking about it.
You've shared a lot of stories with me over the years, Tracy, not that one.
That might take the cake.
I'm shaking my head. Wow.
I wish I could say it was uncommon. All right, so all of that aside, let's get into a little bit of nuts and bolts. And again, disclaimer, what I believe here is not necessarily what the folks who are running some of these platforms, they won't necessarily agree with me on this. And again, you may be running one of these programs and have very different ideas, and that's awesome. You know, we always have a challenge here in sort of the general versus specific, and all organizations are different, have different donor bases, different demographics, and so on. And so, you know, there's always a challenge in terms of, you know, making things applicable to everyone. So we know that they're not. But if I were choosing an audience to offer this to, it would be a limited audience. So again, if you're putting all of your resources into one of these programs, I'd be worried because I see this as a limited audience initiative. So maybe, yep, younger donors and first-time planners. Although we've also seen from Dr. James that younger people are much less interested in wills and more of their assets are in TOD and POD accounts. I'd go for people with less capacity. I'd be looking at my wealth screenings, and I would not be including people, high net worth donors who have more complex asset issues. I would probably include people who have no children. Of course, children add a significant complexity to estate plans. And maybe, donors who have indicated a past interest in leaving a gift to the organization, but haven't followed through. They keep sort of indicating interest, but they can't seem to get moving. I would not be focusing on a mass audience. I would not be sending an offer out to my entire donor base around this at all. Again, I'd probably try to exclude donors with children or donors who I know have complex assets, business owners. I would think very carefully before including donors who have family members with special needs. Again, high net worth donors and donors whose primary assets are not in, are in TOD and POD accounts. Older donors, I want to sort of make a specific point about, because again, it is that last will that matters, but folks in their, folks in their late 70s and 80s are starting to have more complex planning needs. And in particular, you really don't want to mess up eligibility for government benefits, right? And this is also true of folks who have family members with special needs. You can really mess them up if you don't have good advice around these folks. So that being said, I'm telling you, targeted audience, small audience, and it might work for them. How do you even know any of this information, right? Well, most of my clients have done extensive legacy surveys, and I'll just offer my opinion that I've seen a lot of bad legacy surveys out there, so do a good one. Do them and do a good one, but a good legacy survey is going to give you a lot of responses and a group of donors for whom you have information, ideally, if you're asking the right questions about family, business ownership, assets, children, age, and so on. And that can help you target your subsequent outreach to them in a lot of different ways, not only with these kind of programs. Many of my clients have sort of a follow-up survey or questionnaire for folks who have indicated some interest in legacy giving that attempts to pull out sort of more information about their timeline, their roadblocks. Are you waiting to have a hard conversation with family members? Have you not been able to find an attorney, and so on? Because again, then we can offer resources that speak to that. So, target carefully and make sure you have the information to be able to target them. Don't just send this out to everyone. I would never, ever recommend that.
And Tracy, we have a question here that I think is relevant.
Sure.
Meredith asks, and I think I'll know your answer to this, but I'm interested to hear, what do you think about sending a campaign around the will writing tools to donors that are in the legal field?
Oh.
Can of worms?
Yeah. I mean, hi, lawyer. We're offering something to our donors that's going to take business away from you. I mean, honestly, I tend to like having good relationships with estate planning attorneys in our area. Again, though, I say this as an attorney, if I'm not offering good value that can't be replaced by an automated system, that's kind of my problem. But no. Now, again, many attorneys are using technology now to assist in their will writing work. But no, I would really exclude the legal community from this.
There you go, Meredith.
Can of worms. So, again, you did this, right? You got a bunch of disclosures. You had people out there who were clearly waiting for this opportunity and took advantage of it, right? That's what you're hoping for, I think, when you utilize this. What's your plan? You have to know what you're going to do with this, right? Do you have a plan in place to reach out and confirm these gift intentions and learn if the will was in fact executed or not, says Miss 20 wills that never got executed over here. In my experience, it can be really, really hard to get a hold of people. I know that I've spent way too much of my career calling into the void and leaving messages for people who never call me back. There are ways that we can encourage donors to speak to us. And it doesn't usually involve just following up on a gift. So for example, when we're doing our donor surveys, we get significantly higher engagement when we're able to follow up with people based on a story they shared in their survey versus their gift intention. And so if all you have is that someone said they put you in the plan, you're not sure if it's executed or not, it can be even more challenging to actually get people to, and look, some organizations have a great track record. They have great relationships with their donors, and the donors will pick up the phone when they call. It's not true of everyone, especially if you haven't had a lot of contact with them. Are you going to be overwhelmed with follow-up with a lot of people who have made sort of smaller gifts when you really need to be focused on people who are making significant gifts? But again, do you even know how big these gifts are or not? Someone put you in their plan for 5% of their estate. Do you even know how much that is or what it's worth? Do you have a way to find that out so you can prioritize your stewardship and follow-up? Again, do you have the information you need to engage with these donors, their story, their background? Do you have the long-term stewardship plan? How many of your donors, these donors who were identified, through this campaign, how many of them chose not to tell you? From what I understand, it's a pretty high rate of folks who might use this, might get your outreach, use this platform, and then choose not to tell you. And what are you going to do? That's an issue, right? So that's not in the I got a bunch of gift disclosure problem, but it's not knowing how many might be out there that you don't even know about and you can't steward. All things you really need to think about when you're using these. So again, I'll just apologize again if you're looking for 3 simple ways to include these in your marketing plans. I never make things easy, and my clients like to grapple with me around stuff like this, but it is what it is. Again, I'm going to hammer home on this. What is your stewardship capacity? Couple questions that you want to think about. How many of your current Legacy Society members have you ever had personal contact with? Did they let you know 20 years ago and you've never talked to them? How many of these gift intentions have you reconfirmed over time? Do you know your attrition rate? What other marketing touches do you have in place? Again, we've talked about this before. Do you have marketing touches that help address other roadblocks and problems to planning? And we talked about some of those, the need to have tough conversations with family members, the need to plan for folks with special needs. There are ways to engage people around that in your marketing. Do you have those in your plan? Are you prepared to steward them for decades? Or is the next person who has your job going to mark them all as dead? I mean, I'm still scarred over that one. And again, do you have the staffing? Do you have data hygiene to keep track of all of this information? Do you have marketing dollars? You might not. You need to. This isn't as simple as it can be made out to be. So that being said, you may be sitting here thinking, okay, but still, I've done my research and this is something I'm going to try. Awesome. And I want to hear about it actually. So feel free to email me. But maybe you're sitting here thinking, you're like, you know what? I couldn't get this past legal. Or, you know what? There's a lot of things here I didn't really think about. And so maybe this isn't for me right now. Maybe it will be when I have more resources in place. Maybe it's not going to be. But there are things you can do to actually meet donors' needs for convenience and information and resources and support and help them move forward. So, one of the big ones is embrace technology, which I'm sure our friends at MarketSmart would probably talk to you about. But with technology, it makes it easier for donors to engage. We can monitor their digital body language and their engagement that way and prioritize and know when to reach out and engage with them. That has been the single most important tool in my toolbox since I started doing this. Once I started rolling in more robust digital platforms and multi-channel marketing about 7 years ago, it made a huge difference in the number of donors who are willing to engage. Again, using surveys the right way, look, you can uncover a lot of gift intentions through that, especially if you haven't surveyed before. You can generate a lot of qualified leads, you can uncover high capacity donors, target follow-up, and so on, and again, collect that information that makes it more likely that donors will engage with you or respond to your subsequent marketing outreach. You know, it's been a really important tool for every donor I work with. You know, again, there's other ways that you can uncover existing bequest intentions or beneficiary designation, you know, intentions, other than, you know, getting people to make them right now. Many of my clients have found a lot of success with matching gift challenges and some other strategies that encourage disclosure of existing gifts. You can create campaigns that speak directly to those donor needs and roadblocks. And I'll show you some examples that will build trust with your donors, that will engage them, that will get you into that pipeline pretty early on, even before they're at the point where they can start thinking about making, you know, dealing with their documents and so on. You can provide through your marketing on-ramps for donors to share information with you, whether it's follow-up surveys, whether it's making it really easy to schedule time with you, whether it's providing really timely resources that speak to the needs that they have. All of those things are possible. You can prioritize your donor outreach correctly. The reality is most of your bequest dollars are going to come from your higher capacity donors, even though the majority of your bequests are going to come from, you know, lower capacity donors. Figuring out how to utilize your limited human resources in terms of personal follow-up is important. And with all of my clients, it's something we talk about a lot. How do we prioritize prospects? Who, you know, what's the workflow? Right? If a donor has X and such characteristics, they're assigned to a gift officer. If a donor responds this way, they get this. There's a lot of ways that you can prioritize even with limited staff. And again, we can point donors to helpful, convenient resources that meet their needs. And maybe some of those resources are a will planning platform and maybe they're not, and there's other stuff. And of course, again, back to our friend, Russell James, use the right language, right? That makes it more likely that they're going to engage with you. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. And I just put a couple screenshots here of some different types of resources and campaigns that I've developed for some of my clients. Matching gift challenge, again, that can help uncover existing gifts, but can also provide the incentive for donors to move ahead with their planning by helping them make a bigger gift than they thought possible. We provide resources that help people engage in that sort of visualized autobiography that is so important in our world of, you know, helping people see themselves as, you know, change agents in their world and in their stories. Surveys, multi-channel surveys, publications that meet needs, whether it's planning when someone you love has special needs, or resources for folks in their 80s who might have some real questions around, you know, their finances and their planning, where they're going to live. Are they going to age in place? Are they going to do assisted living? Do they have enough money to get through the rest of their lifetimes? They have friends who are passing away. How do they stay socially engaged and active? All these things are things we can offer people that build trust and help them move forward with their plans. And I just want to show, I mean, this might be a little self-serving, and I'm sorry, but I want to share some results from a client of mine who hired us last year to overhaul their marketing program. A two-person office. This is not really a big plan-giving office with a lot of resources, you know, a decent marketing budget, but nothing to write home about. And when they brought us on, they couldn't increase it. By rolling in some of those types of campaigns, by looking at what they were doing and making it better, not by necessarily adding more, not by necessarily replacing anything, but speaking to donor needs, speaking to, you know, to building trust and meeting people where they are on that consideration continuum, and building in multi-channel outreach to make it much more convenient for donors to engage. We're not through with 2019 yet. So despite the fact that we still have a full quarter to go in 2019, you can see that the amount of engagement we've generated from these campaigns has almost doubled. The qualified leads has grown tenfold. Gift notifications have more than doubled. Interest in publications and planning resources has doubled. Their pipeline, I do not mean ROI, but the potential pipeline that if every gift came through, and we were able to convert a certain number of gifts, obviously skyrocketed. So again, if the will writing platforms are not a resource that you feel like you can embrace for whatever reason, there's still a lot you can do to make your program a lot more effective. If it is something that you can embrace, you can embed it in a program that will, be beneficial in a lot of different ways. We're not stuck here. I think what I'm trying to kind of convey here is that, again, there's no magic bullet here. We really all need to step it up in terms of thinking strategically and creatively, understanding the data and the science and all of that behind donor motivation and behavior, and doing what we can with it. And you can do this if you have a tiny marketing budget. You can do it if you have a large marketing budget. We work with donors across the spectrum of resource availability, and can put all of this into action for them. So we have a little time, and I want to make sure we can maybe get to a few more questions, but I also wanted to put up my contact information. I'm happy to talk to anyone about any of this, because talking about plan giving is my hobby, apparently. And I'm kind of obsessed. And anyone who is on this call, no one should feel obligated to, should worry about reaching out. Just do it, email, phone, all of it. If you have any questions or want some citations or resources or anything like that, I'm happy to provide whatever I can.
So Tracy, one of the things that I absolutely love about you is that you just said we have time when we're at the top of the hour. You make yourself available. No, you do. And I just want to thank you. That was incredibly informative. And I see lots of kind words coming in through the chat as well. We have quite a few questions here from varied times throughout the presentation. If you can stick around with us,
I can stay on for a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, for maybe about another 10 minutes or so, so long as questions are coming in. And then again, everything's recorded, so you'll get these recordings and you'll be able to share this internally at your organization. So one of the questions that we had come in here comes from Kate, and it's about stewardship, which is obviously a major area of your focus. So she asks a question around how would you compare effective stewardship for major donors with those of let me make sure I'm getting this right. How would you compare effectively stewarding them being planned gift donors, legacy gift donors, with those of major donors? Are there any key strategies or ideas about working with them as a specific group? So a little bit of the overlap here.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of overlap, right? Again, it's the same kind of concept, right? So a major donor, they make their gift, they become a prospect again, right? That's, again, not one and done. And you can kind of look at it the same way. So as sort of an ongoing, ongoing engagement. At the same time, as with major donors, ideally, you should be tiering your major donors, right? In terms of how you engage and in what ways, depending on, their gifts and their capacity and so on, and allocating your resources accordingly. So, one thing that I have been recommending to many of my clients, and that I found, especially as they are really building up their pipeline of plan giving prospects and donors, and figuring out how to steward them, is how many donors can a gift officer manage, right, in terms of one-on-one stewardship? Not that many, if they're doing it right, and they need to focus on the highest capacity, most complex gifts, most needy donors, so to speak, right? A number of my clients have been adding on a position, instead of adding on, like a senior gift officer, they're adding on a stewardship coordinator whose sole job is to sit on the phone. That's what they do. They sit on the phone, they check in with the Legacy Society members, they field basic questions. They are sort of the liaison for folks. I think that's a really underutilized human resources option for stewardship that people should really think about. And this is absolutely true for major donors as well. Legacy societies, again, your mileage may vary, but donors don't necessarily care about that, right? It's legacy societies are kind of a shorthand for us in terms of like who are our legacy donors. But reporting back, sharing impact, there's a lot you can do that looks personal, but is still scalable to a larger number of donors. When I was running my last program, we had programs internationally that I would go visit. And, you know, it's always trying to find ways to engage with like 2,000 people in a way that looked really personal. I would go and visit, say, you know, a clinic that donors had supported, and I'd take a selfie of myself in front of it, or write up a quick, you know, hey, I'm at this clinic, folks funded it, you guys are amazing, this is what I'm seeing, and I'd set up a mail merge in my email and send it to everyone. Donors loved it. Low cost, super personal. You know, these are the kind of things that some of our major gifts team members do a lot, but I think we can do them in Plan Giving as well. Make sure that if you have legacy donors and prospects who have stopped giving in terms of their outright giving, make sure that they are getting extra love and attention. Make sure they're getting reports, make sure they're included. When donors get annual reports, a lot of times what happens is that, you know, folks don't have resources to send their annual report or impact reports to everyone, and so they stick with current donors. But donors in their late 70s become very unstable in their outright giving, and they often fall off the radar of our organizations. So work with your annual giving team and your donor stewardship teams, if you have them, to make sure that those folks are not falling off the radar, and step up if you have to make sure that they're included in the kinds of cultivation and stewardship touches that other Plan Giving and major donors are getting. I mean, send me an email. I have a lot of ideas.
Yeah. And in that same vein, Bill contributed here that, you know, he's seen a trend towards more blended gifts.
Yeah.
And he's wondering if you have comments on that. And I think you've kind of painted that picture, not only blended, but just like thinking more holistically throughout the whole giving pyramid of, you know, where planned gifts play a role.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this is a popular opinion, Bill, but, you know, I truly believe that major gift officers need to be Plan Giving officers. And often when I've been in a position to hire a major gift officer, I look for someone with Plan Giving experience because they tend to be much more comfortable talking about blended gifts. You know, major donors should have a deferred giving strategy as part of their overall strategy. And again, I've worked in both planned and major gifts and crossing over back and forth. And that's absolutely the case. There's so much money being left on the table by not having these holistic conversations, especially with our highest capacity donors. And a lot of what I do in my Plan Giving marketing is, you know, we're balancing two things. I want to surface the people with the highest capacity, with assets, and so on, and make sure they get on the plate of a gift officer, whether it's major gifts or Plan Giving, and that they're worked with one-on-one. At the same time, my marketing also has to manage the larger number of people who we can't afford to generate that kind of one-on-one attention for, or that don't want it or don't require it. So yeah, blended gifts, huge opportunity. Get your major gift officers trained and partnering with Plan Giving folks, and you'll see the benefits pretty darn quickly.
Awesome. So I know we're running up on time, but we've got a couple more questions that have come in here. Do you have a moment? Can we throw some more at you? Okay. Okay, so Donna just sent this question in. How do you suggest building relationships with estate planners and lawyers? And you mentioned this earlier, not wanting to step on toes by using some of these potential online tools. So this is an interesting question from Donna.
Yeah, and it's more complex than you would think. Again, a lot of it depends on
Okay.
Sorry, I may have an easy answer for something, but I'm not quite sure what it would be. So there are organizations, especially I think community foundations and so on, that do a really good job of engaging the advisor and the lawyer communities by the nature of what they do and their connection to the place. For the most part, when you're dealing with limited resources, both human especially, and other resources, it's not the best use of your time to engage with them, again, unless you're the type of organization where it is. So that sounds kind of wishy-washy, but our job is to steward donors, to engage donors, to inspire donors, to connect them with our programs. to encourage them to reach out to their advisors and be available, knowledgeable, and willing partners when they want to bring us into those conversations. But generally, I'm not going to spend my limited time and resources on creating a portfolio of local planners and lawyers. Again, unless maybe I was at a community foundation, had a very place-specific organization. Generally, I'm working with national organizations, and it becomes more challenging in that way.
Great.
Yeah.
So we have another question here I'll bring up from someone who joined us anonymously. They asked, have you seen a correlation between getting in a will and the giving amounts or the giving frequency during the lifetime of that donor's relationship with them?
Yeah, their lifetime giving goes way up. And, you know, I think there's a fair amount of research out there that obviously you put an organization in your will, you've got some skin in the game now, right? In terms of their success, you love them, they're family now. And so we do see a real increase in lifetime giving and outright giving when folks make a gift in their will. There is no conflict whatsoever. You know, the organization I worked at that marked everyone as dead once they let them know about a legacy gift, they were going under the assumption that if those people got appeals, annual giving appeals, and so on, that they would get mad and take them out of the will, or that will would be their gift, and that they made it, and so they intended to not give anymore during their lifetime, and that is totally wrong. There's no conflict whatsoever, and it only benefits your annual giving.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that backs that up. And then there's always the other side where we've heard stories and anecdotes of people who have never given, weren't anywhere in the database, and then the planned gift shows up. You know, it's like,
well, and that's a lot of what we're trying to do here in terms of surfacing people by building trust and building in touch points and building in the technology that encourages engagement, so we aren't as surprised.
Absolutely, because as an organization, it's kind of incumbent upon us in this profession to make sure that we're building a sustainable, scalable.
Yeah, and this is a metric that some of my clients who have good enough data, which most people don't at this point, is they're tracking that how many gifts are coming in year over year that were undisclosed initially and came in as a surprise versus one. And what we want to see is a trend of more gifts being disclosed ahead of time, fewer disclosed after the fact, but we're really only starting to have the data to be able to look at that and to figure out how to impact it.
Well, Tracy, we've taken 72 minutes out of people's days.
Do we want these last two questions?
We do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Okay. So we have the one here from earlier on. University is a law school which is unhappy about this idea. They think it'll take away from their graduates. Do you have any suggestions around that? I'm not sure I entirely follow, but maybe you do.
Well, yeah. I mean, this comes back to this whole idea of stepping on people's toes, right? It's problem. Again, is that something we really have to take into consideration? I mean, there's definitely folks I've spoken to who are like, look, you want to build good relationships with the lawyers and the legal community in your field. They're the ones who are writing these wills for people and putting stuff in. So you do have to take it into consideration. But again, and I say this as a consultant who is increasingly embracing technology and looking ahead to things like, AI and so on, that may make part of what I do unnecessary. It's incumbent on me to find what the value added is that can't be replaced. But at the same time, there's politics involved, and, we want to have good relationships and so on. So it's something to take into consideration for sure.
And the last question we have here is around community foundations and how they've rolled out surveys to their fund holders in the past. Do you have any insights there?
I mean, I haven't worked with any community foundations, so I can't say offhand. I would be shocked if they weren't. And Jack, maybe you guys, I'm not sure if you work with any community foundations or not, but they should. I mean, there's absolutely no reason that they wouldn't be just as successful.
Yeah, the kind of scary thing behind surveys is that they're applicable not only just in our sector and
everywhere.
Yeah.
People love surveys.
Yeah. Well, and as organizations, we do too, because they allow us to gather more information that we would get out of a one-to-one conversation. So yes, on that front, there's all sorts of applications there. And if you want, you have my contact information. Whoever this anonymous person is that asked that question, feel free to follow up with me, and I can share some resources.
Yep.
Okay.
Me too.
So it looks like we got in under 75 minutes, so that's very good.
That's probably good for me.
Yes, yeah. I think you've got maybe a kid coming home from school, things to go do, clients that you actually need to go spend time with. This has been fantastic, Tracy. Your knowledge and your willingness to share that with all of us, myself included, is just so much appreciated. So for everyone that's been here today, you're going to get the recording. You'll get an email follow up with that. Please share with your colleagues, friends, peers who you think would find this useful. But Tracy, thank you so much. This has really been such a pleasure.
Thanks for taking the time out of your day, everyone. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, with that being said, until next time, Tracy Miller Curtis, thank you so much.
Bye.